Give it long enough and everything evolves into crabs. Even your spell totems. Howdy y'all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. Welcome to day 15 of Teaser season for patch 3.29 and the upcoming Curse of the Allflame expansion. Today, Grinding Gear Games dropped a short video with 2 new uniques in it. But on top of this, there was also a Reddit post that I thought I might want to bring to your attention. Those of you that are considering starting with a Luminary, you're probably going to want to get your hands on a very specific mercenary, and you'll be able to trade for those from other players. But the new news that's come up here, this is from a Grinding Gear Games post over on the Path of Exile 1 subreddit, was that you will be able to search for specific details of the particular mercenary that you want. And the specific details they call out, you can't search for specific gear on the mercenaries because that's going to be randomly rolled. However, you will be able to search for specific combinations of skills and support gems. So that will be something you'll be able to see before you decide whether you buy one or not. So with mercenaries out of the way, why don't we instead talk about crab totems and also the new Abyss helmet. There's a lot to look at here, and this time we actually have Octavian from Grinding Gear Games, who is going to be providing the introduction.
Hi, I'm Octavian, game designer on Path of Exile. Today, we have a few new uniques that can be found throughout Rayclast when playing the Curse of the Allflame update. The unholy fusing of Lichborn skulls has created Subsume the Source, a unique helmet that consumes the abyssal jewels that you socket into it. Each jewel that is socketed will be destroyed, with one modifier chosen at random to be retained. These retained modifiers are magnified.
Okay, I think at this point we can talk about this item in a bit more detail. So Subsume the Source here, the example it is given has 176% increased explicit modifier magnitudes. So what this means is that this is going to be approximately 11 Abyss Jewel mods worth of power that's going to go onto this item. 176% increased explicit, but they also have their baseline 100% for a total of 276%, which with 4 mods is going to end up being your 11 Abyss Jewel mods worth of power. For example, if you were to get life on all of these and you were to have a maximum of 40 life on every single mod, then you're going to end up with your Subsume the Source granting you, well, 290 armor and 58 energy shield, but also 440 life. Now that is going to replace pretty much everything else that is on the item, including your sockets. So you might decide that that's not such a hot idea, but there's lots of things that you could potentially do here. Also, we don't know what the roll range is on that 176, and we also don't know exactly how this will interact with volatile Vaal orbs. I think volatile Vaal orbs could have a very volatile effect in conjunction with this item, but there's going to need to be some testing there. For example, will it multiple dip? The absolute dream scenario, and I definitely do not think Grinding Gear Games will have allowed this to go live, but the dream scenario would be if 176 is able to be scaled up higher, has 3 abyssal sockets that are remaining on Subsume the Source at this stage, if that is able to be scaled higher, and also if the added physical damage with sword attacks is able to be scaled higher. There is a bit of a precedent. There is the unique ring, the Hungry Loop. Volatile Vaal orbs do allow that to increase from being able to consume 4 gems into being able to consume 5. So we don't know exactly how that's going to work, but this is definitely something to play around with and test in conjunction with volatile Vaal orbs. But in terms of other things here, you'll see here that the first Abyss Jewel that was put in was a multiply modified rare, and it had the mod 19 to 27 added physical damage with sword attacks, or at least that's what it scaled up to. And Octavian is going to give an example where multiple additional Abyss Jewels are all used, and they stack many copies of the same stat. That is one of the examples of some of the things that you could see with this. What I want to know, though, is how this interacts if you were to perhaps craft an Abyss Jewel that has only 1 explicit modifier on it. Still needs to be rare, but you can easily make something that is rare and has only 1 mod on it. All you need to do is alteration for the 1 mod, then regal it, and then annul off the extra mod. Now, of course, that annul is going to be a 50-50 annul, and whether it's worth doing or not is going to depend on what sort of combinations people come up with for Subsume the Source, but there's some interesting things going on here. One last thing I want to point out, this cannot have non-abyssal sockets. You will see that Octavian will finish this item, and you'll end up with a helmet that has some pretty ridiculous stats. It's going to look like Abyssus, but much, much better. at least in the context of physical damage with sword attacks. However, it is also going to be forever locked at 0 sockets. That's a real drawback. Can you deal with it? Well, that's up to you to decide.
Effect being empowered by the afflicted abyssal remains. With luck, you can reach some truly impressive outcomes once you've done your best to sate this thing's appetite.
So I think there you can see some pretty high numbers, 60 to 78 to added physical damage with sword attacks, 33% global critical strike multiplier, and I do believe that that already factors in the 176% increased the explicit modifier magnitudes that's on the item. That is definitely looking like a pretty solid setup. That's a good helmet, but it's something that is going to take some RNG to make, unless you're able to do what I mentioned with annulling off mods, and if Subsume the Source is willing to accept those one mod abyssal jewels that are rare. There is a precedent in the past, and I know that Octavian would be aware of this because he played Path of Exile back at the time of this event, where Grinding Games explicitly did not allow 1 or 2 mod rare items to be used very effectively in conjunction with an RNG mechanic, and that was Dark Shrine League. Dark Shrine League had this mechanic whereby you could sacrifice rare items at little altars in your map, and a couple of the particular mods were explosively powerful. But one of the things that you were not able to do was take a 1 mod or a 2 mod rare, because the altar would reject the 1 mod rares from memory, and 2 mod rares would have a 1 in 3 chance of giving you absolutely nothing. So they would be treated as having the 2 mods that are on them, plus a 3rd blank mod. So they might have thought of that. Anyways, I did promise crab totems at the start. Let's move on to crab totems.
The Crustacean's Call will carcinize your spells, calling forth shamanistic crabs to cast them for you as they scuttle along.
This is your totems evolving into crabs. Here, this is one of those staves that has some pretty potent effects on it, but there is a huge opportunity cost because this is a 2-handed weapon, and giving up 2 hands is a big cost. Firstly, remember that implicit 25% chance to block spell damage. That one's important because we're going to be talking about implicits a little bit later when we're talking about getting more damage out of this. But socketed spells are supported by level 20 crab totem. We can see what that does because those crabs that go on walkies in the background. It allows your totems to move, and they do not move slowly because they have 100% increased movement speed. After this, you have quite a chunk of spell damage, 189%. This is not a tremendous amount for a staff, but it's not completely derisory. 72% increased totem duration, which is an important quality of life thing because these are going to be totems that are your only source of damage most likely. And +2 to the maximum number of summoned totems. Worth remembering that the Hierophant still has a modifier in their ascendancy that causes you to get more damage based upon the total number of totems that you've got summoned. However, what is not present here is any way to increase gem levels. So you're going to be casting your spells, and it is only socketed spell totems, it is not attack totems. Not that you would want to use attack totems here because it is a melee weapon, not a ranged one, and it also has no damage on it. But we'll have to find out what the numbers are like on this overall. Ultimately, I think that this is going to do enormously less damage than using a traditional spellcaster weapon, but is going to provide you with a substantially smoother playstyle. And maybe, just maybe, you might start seeing situations where people who are playing a totem build might decide to weapon swap. When they're running through a map, they can use the Crustacean's Call. When they get to the map boss, or potentially just any individually really tough monster, maybe then they swap over to something that is more dedicated to doing lots of damage. But have a look at some of the spells that are cast here, because these definitely look like they've got legs, no pun intended. And also, I want you to think of some of the things that might be really good that you could do in conjunction here, like for instance, having a skill that freezes effectively and having freeze proliferation on your character. That may actually make up for the fact that you're dealing less damage, and may end up being a better overall package than a traditional totem setup that does more damage, but also has much more downtime on the damage that it does. And finally, don't use this for bosses. This feels like it's going to be terrible on bosses.
These crabs are fully considered to be totems, but have the distinct advantage of many, many legs. Check out these and all our other new uniques coming in Path of Exile, Curse of the Allflame.
Right, so I did say that we would be talking about implicits. Let's have a look at some of the things that you could potentially get instead of that 25% chance to block spells if you ended up getting quite lucky with a Vaal Orb. +2 to the level of socketed fire, cold, or lightning gems on caster staves. +2 to the level of socketed physical or chaos gems on caster staves. Socketed gems is supported by level 10 multiple projectiles. Socketed gems is supported by level 10 elemental penetration to staves. Global crit multi, up to 50% on staves. And enemies you kill have a 20 to 25% chance to explode, dealing 1/10 of their maximum life as physical damage to caster staves. There's also increased spell damage as well, which is definitely live because the numbers are so high on it. So the pool of mods that are available as Vaal implicit corruptions, whilst it is expanded, every single one of these new ones that I've pointed out is quite good. So there's definitely a lot of additional bonuses that are available to be found there. Does this mean that you're going to want to be Vaal-Orving your Crustacean staff? Probably not. I think this is something you're going to want to double corrupt, because if you do hit 2 of these premium corrupts, I think then you can make up for the fact that you're not getting very much damage from your weapon. Of course, that then has to compete with the alternative, which is having a traditional spellcaster staff, traditional spellcaster staves being buffed a lot in patch 3.29, and then potentially having your setup in your chest piece instead. One last thing to note is that because the socketed spells are supported by level 20 Crab Totem, you are getting effectively a more multiplier there, because that is one less support gem that you need to get set up. All in all, I think this is going to be a fun unique. Whether it's strong or weak is going to really live or die depending upon the numbers on Crab Totem. If they deviate wildly from the numbers that are found on a level 20 Spell Totem, then perhaps this is going to end up being a bit disappointing. On the flip side, if they end up being the same as what's available on the current totems, then I can definitely see a good reason to consider using this. And Subsumed is definitely something that will be interesting, but we need to find out exactly how it interacts with a bunch of other things in the game. I'm going to leave it there. May your Vaal Orbs and your volatile Vaal Orbs, especially on Subsume the Source, have interesting results.